Hello and welcome to Crypto Interviews. My name is Claudio and this is Cryptocurrencies, the channel where I do crypto reviews, news, interviews, and blockchain games reviews. And today I've got I Teach to Learn and Learn to Teach, BlockchainBrad, joining me here for an interview to discuss leverage exchanges, crypto, and just life in general. Brad, welcome to my channel. And how are you doing today?
Mate, thank you so much. I'm doing well. It's holidays now in Australia. My kids are at home and I'm relaxed. Obviously, no tie with you. Yeah. I wanted to just bring it back with the cuppa and get real on the blockchain. And it really is. It's great to catch up with some fellow YouTubers. I've known you for some time now, so thanks for the invite and I'm looking forward to it.
Definitely. Thank you. And actually, I remember watching some of your older videos about Neo because I caught a big interest in Neo when I first started with cryptocurrencies. At the beginning, when I started in 2017, it was just Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum. I didn't know about anything else. And then when I started looking into the alts, Neo was kind of the first that caught my attention. And then, of course, I checked the dApps and videos out there. And I actually saw a lot of videos from you drinking your coffee and just reading the news and talking about Neo. And you were really shocked with some of the advance that Dahang Fei has actually done. And I know you've had him on your show for 2 times, right? I believe.
Yeah, and I actually know Da pretty well now, fortunately, having done a lot of that research into Neo. And, obviously for those listeners, I'm not ever trying to shill Neo. A lot of people thought I was, a big shiller. A lot of people thought I was paid a lot of money to do that. But what was funny is back then, I didn't even know there was a lot of money in crypto, to be honest. That was certainly not why I came into crypto. I was kind of one of the naive, nerdy sort of speakers. And I felt like there wasn't a lot of education focus in a lot of the content. So that's what happened with Neo, truly, is that I'd invested in Neo pretty early, but not at the Anshan stage.
Not the Anshan stage.
Not quite.
I was thinking that too. I was like, why didn't I get in at the Anshan stage?
Yeah, I just got in as they'd switched into Neo. But to be honest with you, the reason why I was so interested in Neo was actually because I wanted to know more about permissionless and permission technology. And I knew that they were, from the outset, doing a lot more than just Neo themselves. They were actually going to branch out. And we saw what happened with Ontology. But obviously, I've learned a lot since then. Learned a lot about some of the other stuff going on in crypto, learned a bit about, the sentiment in China. So there's a lot actually that Neo's facing now. There's a lot of challenges that they have to sort of overcome. And that's also why they've moved across to the US and tried to collaborate more and build their technology more globally, because in China right now, the sentiment is pro-blockchain for sure, but it is definitely not pro-crypto, So it's a tough gig. So Neo had to go global in that sense. And it all comes down to technology in the end, in my opinion. Beyond all of the shilling we see, beyond all that transient pumping and dumping of things, what will matter in the end is platforms that actually do real stuff, and provide real utility and real value. And right now, as you know, we don't see enough empirical evidence of a vast array of platforms or technologies doing that correlate with their tokens. So, it's been an interesting journey all the way from Neo to now.
Actually, to talk about Neo, what do you think is the reason that so many ICOs that were on Neo have actually left Neo, migrated to their own blockchain, or decided to go to some other blockchain like Binance, for example? What's happening to the Ethereum of China, really? What do you think is going on there? Is it just their delays, the fact that they're moving so slow with Neo 3.0 while other projects are moving much faster to progress with their blockchain development, or what do you really think is the reason?
Good question. It's difficult to answer that because I'm not one of the apps or not one of the startups, but I can only assume that it's based on a technological reason. And I have had discussions with some CEOs who did actually migrate from Neo or move across into other platforms, and their response was one of scalability or one of performance, really, is that they were having a lot of technological issues at that time when Neo was seriously, being challenged by a lot of the technological advancements of other platforms. A lot of devs were actually moving into Ethereum at the time as well. And Neo at that time had a great brand. It was attracting a lot of interest, a lot of applications, but I think fundamentally underneath, it just didn't have the same performance standards or the same technological success that Ethereum had at the time. So people were just simply shopping around for something that worked better. Now, for today, I can't say that of Neo because I know that they are certainly working at the back end on improving a lot of those things.
Yeah.
So once again, without trying to shill them, I know that they're trying to redress some of those very real issues of what caused that move away from Neo then. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can sort of get back some of that market share, but their focus is more so on applications now rather than, the D-app sort of ideal, because they want to also try and capture some of the market share of mainstream applications and mainstream business and bring that across. So enterprise is a big focus for Neo now, whereas before the narrative was different. And certainly their technology with the limited number of nodes, they had a big question mark on some of the nodes themselves even that were crashing or causing problems for the rest of the system. So there was a lot of tech issues that had to be addressed. And to be honest with you, I think Neo moved so fast that even the team couldn't sort of keep up with the pace of interest because their tech was still crude in the beginning, and yet they had this massive influx of interest, perhaps that wasn't driven so much by the tech, but more by the price. So it's a tough gig when you see these kinds of pumps in price.
Yeah, it was surprising actually, because I remember that there were so many scams starting to pop up with Ethereum because there were just so many dApps out there, so many smart contracts being deployed. Whereas on Neo, it was kind of considered a safe haven when it comes to ICOs because a lot of them were actually legit. Whereas now with the bear market, we're seeing a lot of these ICOs dying out. Like for example, Aphelion, which is the other one. Narrative is the next one that we've heard. Azura World, I don't know how much longer that's gonna go, and we're seeing all these different projects running out of funds, and not necessarily that they were scams. Like maybe you could argue Aphelion was scammy, but other ones were like running out of funds, right? Simple as that. And they just didn't expect it. Maybe they didn't sell their token sale funds on time, like the token sale Neo. When the price was high enough, who knows? I mean, things like that, right? And it's just concerning. But what's your take on Ontology and why? I mean, I've seen that they've got so many small partnerships. They're really trying to spread the word out there, market themselves so well, but yet they can't really attract so many dApps to build on Ontology like we were seeing with Neo before. What do you think that could be?
Well, again, it's interesting we talk about this because the references to China are relevant here because, as I was mentioning before, there's only going to be a few cryptocurrencies or crypto assets, in this case utility tokens, that are going to be supported, I think, by China. And the reason is because, firstly, they're taking a very hard line because of all the losses that people have incurred through the very risky play of crypto gambling. The speculation is still the key feature of this. And as many people would appreciate or know, is that gambling is prominent throughout Asia, as a sort of social activity or as a, common activity that many people in that region pursue. And it's been no different in crypto. So going back to Ontology, one of the things that they always, tried to establish is strong relationships with important parties in China. And that's always been the case. And it's something that certainly Da Hongfei, would espouse as well, being someone who is representing both Ontology indirectly and also directly with Neo, because obviously he's overseeing some of the things that are happening in Ontology. Yeah. But when it comes to the fundamentals, when it comes to the technology itself, I think what's really important to understand is that they are moving towards the enterprise sector. They're trying to make sure they can tap into that market, as I mentioned before, and Neo kind of followed through after Ontology in that respect. So what is really important with Ontology is understanding how they produce revenue and whether that correlates with the token, as with any other asset, because they do produce revenue, and that's already a good sign, I think, for any good blockchain startup. But when it comes to those speculators trying to understand what that token means, that's another story. That really has to be really explored with the Ontology team, I think, because we need to know right from the outset that token really does represent utility, like others. So if we go back to the technology themselves, has absolute real use case. We know that right from their decentralized ID system all the way through to just being able to enable a hub technology for the onboarding of enterprises to make it easy for them. A bespoke model that helps them basically as a one-stop shop to allow them to reap benefits of blockchain. That all matters. But what does that token fundamentally represent? And that's the tough thing, because once again, a lot of people expected Ontology to go to the moon, like many. But the issue is when you start to see those prices rise, they definitely do not reflect the longitudinal trajectory that it should be.
Exactly.
No, it should be paced according to their business model.
Yeah.
So long term, I think they'll still be in this space, but I do. My hope is that they will get some of the support from the top in China to be acknowledged. Well, on-chain is really important because on-chain has some of that that credibility already built into it, because the investors associated with on-chain are already well respected in China. So I think on-chain is very important to mention here, because obviously DAO is connected to that, but they have a direct sort of business effect and an important business role, being a private enterprise. So I think more and more we're going to see the relaxation of this sort of top-down suppression of crypto in China, but it'll be filtered through by just a few at the beginning, and we're not sure which ones that will be, but they will have to prove beyond a doubt that they do have true utility that reflects their model. So that's going to be the tough thing to prove. Outside of that, I know Ontology are working hard to branch and build, but once again, the proof is all about them, and the proof is in the pudding of their technology as it moves forward. So I can't really say I know exactly what's going to happen with Ontology's token, but I do know that I'll be speaking with Li Jung soon again to better understand just how much they have evolved since I last spoke, to make sure that they're progressing towards proof of utility and in that token, because it has to happen, for all of them at some point. We can't just keep speculating on the value of tokens, hoping for prospective utility, you see. Because right now, so many of them are separated, and we see revenue coming in, we see money coming in, but then the speculators they affect price more than anything.
And the whales as well.
So we need,
Thank you for that. So now, if you had a choice to pick from your personal opinion and basically all the research that you've been doing and the interviews you had with them, who do you think is gonna do better in the long run, Neo or Ontology?
Well, that's a tough question, and I'm going to get responses very quickly from those CEOs. I would say from a technological standpoint, I would say Ontology, and the reasoning behind that would probably be based on support that it has. Once again, and also the way in which they built out their technology, it's far more robust by design, and it also had the benefits of utilizing some of the pre-existing Neo technology as well, and it also has the support there. To add a disclaimer, I think they are going for different markets as well. I think Neo once again is going for that global market share, trying to really focus on that public chain to work with and integrate with some of those well-known brands, like for example Microsoft. We know that they're looking more towards how they can basically espouse the use case of public blockchains in that arena. But without rambling, I do think that Ontology has a great chance of adoption, and especially in China, I think it has a great opportunity to really benefit from being one of the first movers there. But once again, we just don't know, to be honest. And I want to make sure you guys know I don't own any Ontology. And I never did any of the stuff with Ontology to promote it for money. But I having known Li Jung for such a long time, he is so serious. Like you go to a party with him, and we fit in really well because we're quite boring compared to most people at the party.
Also, you've met him face to face as well, right?
Yeah, several times. Okay. And every instance, he's always been someone who he exudes legitimacy, whether or not people agree with Ontology. I can tell you from experience that man is very much focused on trying to build Ontology. And that's just his mindset. He's not necessarily the most social person when it comes to representing them for brand sake, but he definitely is a great representative of their technology. He understands it. You can talk at length with him about it. So that, gives me confidence that it has good leadership, and it has a future despite its price flux.
Yeah. It's very centralized as well at the moment, to be honest, because they still own, I believe, is it 5 of the consensus nodes that they own out of the 7? They owned 7 at the beginning, and now I think they've given 2 of them, they've delegated 2 of them to other companies. but the fact that he still own about 5, I mean, it's still quite centralized. And not to mention the transactions are just extremely fast, which is the positive thing, right? That's what I really like about Ontology. The fact that I can send you some ONG or ONT and you get them in a minute or less, right? In a few seconds, maybe. So I think
Exactly.
that's really important. But the fact that it's centralized
yeah.
kind of puts people off as well.
Well, it's funny because it puts many of the people who support decentralization off, for sure.
Yeah.
But once again, if you go back to the narrative of enterprise, it doesn't put them off. Because one of the trade-offs with vast decentralization is often scalability. So Ontology had to really try to work out a way to balance their tech with the not just the use case, but with the target market that they were going for. So I think over time, you'll see increasing decentralization. You'll see less control of their nodes, for example, as you mentioned. But Neo did the same thing, as you know. There was very few nodes really comparatively. And even the likes of EOS with their 21 is still a low number compared to what we see now. But over time, if they want to play in the arena of decentralized technology, they're going to have to increase the openness, increase the open source nature, increase certainly the number of nodes that are distributed across the globe.
Yeah.
But I think that many of the Chinese startups tended towards starting with a more decentralized model from the outset. Many of them did that. So we'll have to see in the future whether or not they can compete in the decentralized arena, because already we see startups, particularly in the layer 2 sector, far surpass this sort of number of nodes well and beyond. We're talking about hundreds of nodes now. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, but I do think their agenda is more about business and more about building revenue and building something that's sustainable.
Definitely. Thank you for that. And before we move on to the next topic, I have one more question on Ontology, and just to get your opinion. If John Lee is actually saying that he's got a strong connection to the Chinese government, and obviously they want to build up their own cryptocurrency, why is it that they don't want to actually use Ontology, considering that they've already got a system in place, like architecture, everything, like the blockchain is actually
there? That's a good question.
I mean, I'm curious, why isn't the Chinese government wanting to do that?
Well, they do want to do that, but I want to just qualify something or just clarify something. Li Zhong and the Ontology team don't have, from my understanding, direct lines to the government. They've been working for years trying to establish very strong and lasting relationships. That's why, you often see or hear about some meetings or, efforts that they're making, because everything is relationship built when it comes to new technology, no matter where it is. But in China particularly, it's all about who you know and whether or not you can get that top-down support. So they've been building that quite a lot. And they've leveraged a lot of their connections through, obviously, Neo as well. So it's in Da Hongfei's interest, actually, as well, to try and support the growth of Ontology by offering his network as much as possible. But what we do see is that there's a few of them vying for the respect of the government when it comes to public blockchains, because right now it's the private permission systems that do uphold value in China. They certainly can evidence more productive ends for both government and private sectors. But when it comes to the public, I don't think that China's still very convinced of their utility. And so once again, we're in this phase now where they're assessing the value of public blockchains and even applications on board, and most importantly, those tokens, to make sure that they only support those that can have proven long-term utility. So I think what we'll see is Neo and Ontology are in the race for this, but we just don't yet know which is what's going to play out. So fingers crossed for them that they have success and they have support. But yeah, I mean, the reports I'm hearing are that there are some other public chains out there that are getting even more support than Ontology.
Hopefully we'll see how they progress. Now, to move on from China to Australia. So what's crypto like in Australia? What's the sentiment for crypto like over there?
Well, it's pretty good actually when it comes to crypto, because Aussies like to have a bit of a bet. Where we come from a long line of non-risk averse sort of personalities. I think our history. I don't know if you're familiar, but a lot of people came from the convicts, initially. And now we have a very diverse community from people from all around the world. We have a national horse race every year that is more than a horse race for us. So naturally, when you're growing up in this country, there's a bit of a support for speculation, if you will. So in that sense, in terms of willing to have a bit of a sort of a spec bet on something, it's very popular in Australia. Per capita, I think we are up there with some of the some of the other nations in the world that are willing to really gamble in the crypto casino. Yeah. But when it comes to other things, let's talk about that. So big tick for willing to gamble in Australia. But when it comes to understanding the fundamentals, understanding exactly how crypto works in concert with innovation and blockchain startups and distributed ledger technology, I don't think that's very strong, to be honest, because many people in Australia pursue that price movement. They're looking for fast money, fast outcomes when it comes to profit.
Yeah.
So hopefully over time we'll see more and more legitimate startups emerge that showcase the tech that underpins all of this. But still, I think it's still today, exchanges, hype, promotion, of new startups. I think that still reigns. I think that's the draw card.
Definitely. And the job situation, how is it in Australia? Is it still as good as it used to be? Because I've heard there was some recession that was going to start there or something like that. But I know that it was really easy to find a job over there. And there were just so many people immigrating there, even from Ireland. I know that a lot of my friends from Ireland went to Australia for 2 years.
Well, it's changing, that's for sure. Since, I got into crypto, there was increasing risks of recession. And obviously, our national debt is a concern. It's not the same levels of the US, for example, but we're certainly digging ourselves a hole and affecting our economy. So it's probably today, if we talk about, in comparison to 2 years ago, it's harder to get a job. But I always believe in such a small population that if you really do want to, achieve employment, if you want to seek and attain employment, you can in Australia. You might not always get the exact job you want, but because we still have a population that's relatively small in comparison to many, and we still have an economy that is not yet in an official recession, I think it's still, we're okay. But we certainly need to maintain good leadership and better fiscal policy to redress some of the debt we have. Because if we don't, then obviously we're going to go down the track of a recession, and we're going to suffer the consequences of a lot more than what we see today. And that's also why I think people do look to crypto. It's funny you mentioned that, because they look at this as an alternative perhaps for hedging or for moving away from a depreciating, monetary system, one in which, we know is devalued over time. We know that, people are becoming more aware, I think, of the value of alternatives. And so the narratives in Australia of libertarianism, or the narrative of circumventing authority, that was really attractive to a lot of people in the beginning.
John McAfee style.
Yeah, but now I think definitely, like he would be someone who would be popularized here. But now we're also starting to see beyond that, beyond these ideals of moving, giving the finger to the government, is actually saying, okay, what does this actually do for me? How is this more beneficial for me in terms of holding assets? What does this asset do? Is it a 24/7 asset? Is it cheaper than me using banks that are traditionally structured? And they're starting to learn there's a lot of benefits there for them, not just from the standpoint of the libertarian, but also of the pragmatist. There's a great benefit and boon to blockchain startups.
Definitely. No, it's interesting. It's interesting to hear that, because I talked to quite a few people from different countries, and it's always nice to get their input from locally, what they think about crypto in that specific country. But thank you for that, Brad. Let's actually move on and talk about a topic which has been discussed a lot amongst a lot of YouTubers, leverage exchanges. What's your opinion on that, and how dangerous is that for the crypto space, and could it actually hurt crypto? Because we're seeing so many, even not necessarily new people, but people that have been hodling, switching to trading just to trade on leverage exchanges, when trading itself is very dangerous. What's your take on that?
Wow. This is a big question. And, asking this from me, I've been very vocal about this. And it's really tough, because I don't want to name names. I don't want to get into that situation where I start to be self-righteous and start to suggest that I know and others don't. But I do want to say that I have a very strong opinion about this. And many of my colleagues in the space know, some of them, now regard me as an enemy perhaps because I am vocal about it. But the reason is because crypto itself represents a whole another degree of risk, because the market is relatively small compared to your traditional money markets. Wall Street, for example, has trillions of dollars. We're talking about billions in the context of crypto. And that sounds like a lot. But when you assess that in the context of the number of assets that are there, and you look at other factors, like real wash trading, like real fake volume that does exist, and that's been backed by many, many researchers, not just by what I'm saying, then what happens is you realize that the actual ecosystem of crypto is relatively fragile, and we don't necessarily know the correct figure when it comes to legitimate liquidity, legitimate volume, and legitimate, and successful startups. So bringing that back to leverage trading, when you know that already the risk is amplified. Now, with leverage trading, many of the even well-experienced traders who promote this in the space, they will tell you very, very quickly, this is not a game for the inexperienced. This is not something that you should dabble in and play around with, especially if you're new to crypto. You will get wrecked, as they call it. Yeah. And they're right, because the wrecked rate is extremely high. We're talking 90 to 95% wrecked rates, roughly. Yeah. So when you think about that for a second, and then you couple that with parties in the space who are encouraging and espousing this, what people need to understand, I think, is that many of those parties promoting this don't have the trading experience, not years of experience. We're talking, that they've made a switch into this months ago, and somehow it makes them qualified to espouse and encourage through their what they call a ref link. So what happens is that many of the people have cottoned on, or many of the influencers have cottoned on to the ability to make a substantial amount of money potentially through their audience by having ref links and by advertising essentially for certain leverage trading platforms. Now, once again, I'm not against leverage trading platforms, definitely not. And I'm not against those who are qualified to explain it and teach about it and be really clear about the risks. Yeah. But in this instance, I'm really against those inexperienced parties using their audience to essentially reap the benefits of that ref link. Because one of the things I learned recently was that we're talking about monthly incomes of between $10,000 to $60,000. And that's not coming from me. That's coming from people who are actually doing this, that are supporting some of these leverage, and they're just being really transparent about it. So it really affected me. It made me think, okay, what if my children were listening to those parties that they trusted for years and then went and dabbled, with no experience and lost all of their savings at, say, the age of 20? That's just not okay for me as a dad, because I want to make sure that there's a semblance of trust that these parties have built up with their audience. I want to make sure that that audience is really, truly informed about all of those risks, and then has the best information available to them as they start to experiment. And, as I said, because the risks are already amplified by being in crypto, then they're magnified several times over in the realm of leverage trading. Yeah. So it's a tough thing for me to support, and I don't think I ever really will, when it comes to those parties just simply being inexperienced, promoting it clearly for money, and then not acknowledging that, not really being accountable for that in the context of the losses that many of the people who listen to them incur.
Exactly, and a lot of people have been talking about massive losses and also losing all of their funds by leverage trading on various exchanges. So it's horrible to see that in more and more communities. And yet, for some reason, even though these people are going back to the influencer to report it, not to blame the influencer, but to say, look, I've actually lost all my money here, they continue to promote it. And I think that should be a red alert. It should be just like, okay, stop. I made a mistake. That's it. I'm not going to do it anymore. Whereas when this continues, I think that's where it's a big problem as well.
And it's a huge red flag. And I do want to acknowledge any of the media speakers, whether they're independents or whether they're something, of an entity, speaking up about these issues, because it does matter. It does matter that we have an ability to be colleagues in the space but have enough freedom of speech to be able to address our concerns. Because one of the things that is scary in crypto as a media rep is that you can easily go against an alliance of people, whether they're an alliance of influencers, whether you're going up against a media entity. You can quickly put yourself in a very difficult situation where you become the villain for speaking up. And I know this because I've been in that situation before, and a few others have. But I do want to acknowledge, rather than focusing on those parties doing this, questionable conduct, I want to acknowledge those who have spoken up in a very professional manner. And they're doing that not for their own pocket. They're doing that at risk for more support, more subscribers, more followers. Because it's not a sexy thing. It's not a popular thing to speak up and be controversial. But they're doing that obviously because they're trying to highlight and illuminate something that is potentially very serious, where millions of dollars, are being lost. And one thing that is important to mention here is that some of those influencers I'm talking about or alluding to, they don't trade themselves. Some of them don't leverage trade. Yeah. So that's another issue on top of this, is that they're not practicing, many of them, what they promote. Because it's not about preach, but it is promotion. And many people say, oh, look, I just put a ref link in. I don't really promote them. I said, no, you do. Because that ref link is a type of promotion, advertising that you can get a certain amount of free dollars or free money in that ref link. That's an attractive thing to someone young. That's a hook. And so what is the cost of those hooks? How do some of these people sleep at night when they know that this is something that perhaps, they're not doing themselves. Perhaps they're causing immense harm financially for many people who really should be focusing on Christmas, focusing on things that they can afford. And it just bothers me because you don't want to see a lot of people wrecked, consistently. And you want to do it with serious disclaimers in place. And I found that a lot of them just don't have them. And they're not also disclosing just how profitable this is. And as I said to you before, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars a month. We're talking about far more than many people earn in a year in some instances. And then we're talking about alliances of association among those leverage trading supporters and promoters. There's a lot involved here, I know, but without naming names, which doesn't really matter as much. What matters is people dive deeply into this issue, look into it for themselves and form their own opinions of the risks associated with leverage trading promotion.
Yeah. And I know there was one YouTuber who actually made a dedicated video to talk about one of these leverage exchanges, to say, please don't set up an account there. You will get wrecked if you're not qualified. And he actually got a few people subscribing through his ref link. I don't know why he mentioned the ref link, but he did. And they actually subscribed using his ref link. Even though he said, look, don't subscribe if you're not qualified, if you're not a trader, don't use it. But just so you know, I did put the ref link there, but don't use it, right? Don't use it unless you're really a pro trader. And many people did use it. So he was shocked as well that they actually did it.
I don't know. I'm assuming that was Crypto Love. If it wasn't,
that's
then
it.
he was.
Yeah, you got that right.
Yeah, I'll mention him because I promoted that particular video, and I did so because I've known Crypto Love for a very long time. And I wrote to him personally before I sent that video out to support what he'd done. And I said to him personally, and I hope he doesn't mind I mention this, but I said, mate, I'm really proud of you because you actually spoke up about some of the issues in the past, because he referenced things like IEOs and ICOs. He was very honest about his own involvement there. At then he went one step further and he said, you know what? I'm going to lose some friendships because of this video. I'm literally going to have people attack me, but I'm doing this because we at least need to have the discussion. And I support that. I support the right to be able to have a voice, for us to all share in this dialogue, because that's what it's supposed to be about. If we espouse open source tech, it's exactly the same thing when it comes to having the rights to free speech.
Yeah.
So I support his stance when it comes to acknowledging the risks and perhaps, went down the track of naming names. But as I said to you off camera, is that I am still undecided about whether or not that's a bad thing. Because once again, if people are doing something, whether that be in the mainstream, whether that be in crypto, I think it's important that people know of the issue and even perhaps know some of those who are really doing this. Because as I said to you, it's not just one person. Sometimes there's alliances here. And there's an immense risk in crypto when you know that allies can start to affect outcomes, whether that be price of something, whether that be, in this case, more and more people essentially engaging in this platform that perhaps shouldn't. Because once again, let's be real, the majority of influencers today are not qualified traders. That's just the truth.
Yeah.
And so in that respect, think about the kind of effect that's having on the people. And it's a shame there's not a lot of assessment done. But one thing it does concern me is now media entities in crypto are also supporting these kinds of leverage trading platforms with promotions. And I wrote to one, and I'll name them. They won't like it, but I will. I noticed that they're called Block TV News.
Okay, I heard about them.
Yeah, they started to do a sponsored section on Bybit, for example. And I thought to myself, okay, they're a news entity, much like, they're purporting to be like the Block, for example, or something. But yet they're doing these sponsored pieces. Obviously, there's revenue involved, there's payment involved to promote Bybit. And I wrote to them and said, guys, this is not news. This just isn't. This is something different. This is literally promoting something using your news platform. Make sure you differentiate. Make sure it's clear. And the response was, well, we have made it clear because we put the logo in for Bybit. And I said, no, that's not enough. You need to be really explicit, because if you're a news platform, people need to know the difference. And I think that's fair. So their response was, they'll endeavor to do that, I suppose. But my issue is, when you have news platforms and then you have this huge network of influencers, not just in the West, but right through Asia as well, promoting these leverage trading platforms, what's the consequence of that in the broader picture for crypto?
Yeah.
And the reason I ask this is, if many people are losing, do they continue to lose and stay? Or do they lose, leave?
And it affects their families as well. I mean, you could end up getting to divorce and things like that if they're married or have a family. So it could really have a massive impact. It's pretty much like gambling, hands down, like gambling. I mean, there are people that are obsessed with gambling.
Leverage trading is gambling.
Exactly. And there are people that are obsessed with gambling and commit suicide over that as well. I mean, it can get really serious. So it's horrible. It's horrible to see this is happening. And it kind of comes back to the BitConnect days. If you notice that, like, I don't know, it's not, you can't really compare it to BitConnect, but it has some similarities, to be honest, right?
Well, in terms of the risk to reward for that issue, it absolutely has some valid points. So if we talk about the reward for influencers, just like BitConnect, that it's very, very real. When we talk about the immense risks for the participants, also very real. And what's interesting, and I won't name the names, but I really encourage anyone to go out and research this themselves. Some of the people promoting some of the leverage trading platforms were some of the people promoting BitConnect. Some of the people who promote, I tweeted about this recently and did some research on it. There was another one that was very questionable, and I haven't yet, gone down the rabbit hole and proven more of it. But there was another project that was much like BitConnect potentially, or by structure. And many of the parties who promote Bybit were promoting that as well for money. So the issue is, what's the agenda of that influencer? Honestly, we have to all be honest about this and just get real. Now, if you're there to just line your pockets, okay, and you don't want to actually support the education, support, your fellow crypto advocate or crypto participant to also benefit from this, and what the bloody hell are you doing with subscribers and followers? Why not just go and do your own thing? Because there is a real responsibility and a level of respect I think we need to bestow upon anyone who's listening to our content, to the point where we are really, really clear on the risks of these. And I don't think some of them are, to be honest.
Yeah. And I think this is what's happening. Like, some people are pushing education, and then there are some people that are using YouTube as a tool to simply make money. And I think that YouTube are slowly going to tackle down on these sort of people via algorithm, or I don't know which methods they're going to use, but I can see this actually happening eventually because
I think
it doesn't seem to, I don't see this lasting, basically. This kind of issue is not something that is sustainable, right? Because people are going to be impacted, people are going to be affected, and it's going to spread. The information is going to be out there, right? And
exactly.
I think they're going to take some kind of action. And if it's not YouTube, there's going to be other, I don't know, let's say maybe authorities that are going to take action, I think, on something like that at some point.
I actually hope so, because again, we're talking about perhaps a misuse of power and privilege in this instance, because it's a money market. Many people say to me, oh, Brad, it's no different to, shilling a product. And I said, well, no, it is different because this is a money market. This is about prospective money, prospective assets. Some of them haven't even been proven yet. And in this instance, this is about simply making a bet on, as you know, the whole point of leverage trading is the speculative value of an unproven asset sometimes. So that's why many of them also focus on highly liquid assets in this context, because once again, they're trying to make sure that they have some sort of longevity as leverage trading platforms. And so liquidity is an important criterion. But when you see the inclusion of very, very illiquid assets into this margin trading platform, then I really start to raise the eyebrow, because the potential for that particular asset to be manipulated is even more serious, because, certain nefarious parties can actually move the needle. They can change the outcome very quickly because of that illiquid sort of setup and scenario. And then even more people get wrecked. And we see this actually play out. We've seen a lot of controversy recently with startups that potentially had that happen to them. And we don't know for sure, but it's very likely. So once again, it's not that the leverage trading platforms are necessarily bad or good. It's just that there's stuff going on the outside of that. There's stuff going on. So I do apologize. My children are at home, so if you hear music,
no worries. Don't worry about it.
But yeah, in that sense, basically, there's a lot going on in terms of just trying to really look through the lens and try and see through what's really going on. Because if we don't, then once again, we are putting ourselves at risk. It behooves us to do the research.
Yeah, I mean, this is how it is. And we just have to hope that this is eventually going to stop at some point, or if it doesn't stop, somebody's going to take some kind of action and stop it, basically, and as simple as that. But actually, to talk about another topic, and that's about mass adoption for crypto, because a lot of people have been wondering what could it be that could trigger or what could be the trigger for mass adoption in crypto. And my personal opinion is that blockchain games is going to be the trigger, simply because gamers, the gaming market is absolutely huge. And a lot of them are made out of younger generations, which are used to in-game assets like digital currency within a game that they can only use in that game. And for them, cryptocurrency is something like just another day in the park, right? So what's your opinion on that?
On gaming itself?
Yeah. No, I mean, blockchain games. I mean, do you think that's going to be the real trigger for mass adoption in crypto?
Right. Just before I answer it, can you just hold on 1 second? I'm just going to ask my children to turn that music down. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, no worries.
Okay, just 1 second. I won't be long.
Cool.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
I feel really bad. I'm embarrassed about it. But I did mention to my kids we were doing this. Yeah, so just quickly talking about gaming, I'm really glad you mentioned it, because I'm a huge supporter of gaming. I think that the reasoning is that if you look pre-blockchain, we already see evidence of tokenized models working. And I literally mean tokenized assets where they can be used interchangeably. It was used in a centralized way. And that's why I'm really supportive of things like Engine.
Yeah.
I've spoken to Loom, for example. I'm hugely supportive of Somnium Space as a VR-based, gaming initiative where they're going to have their own currency built into a new VR world. We know the likes of Decentraland being supported by, the coin. I'm not exactly sure who the supporters are there, but there's a lot of VC interest in Decentraland. But regardless of which particular gaming platform people support, I think underneath that it's that use case.
Exactly.
Is that we definitely see the potential of this being real. And, I just really want to support those things that are real, that we can see synergize with their growth. That has real token velocity, has the real potential to emerge as something that is being traded, for its sake, rather than for speculation and price movement.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, with Engine, I've actually done a video yesterday with the top 5 crypto projects that I think are going to do well in 2020. And Engine has been mentioned as one of them, of course. And this is exactly the reason, just like you were saying. I mean, I think that they've solved a major problem in the gaming world. And that is, of course, the fact that in-game assets can be tradable freely in an open market. Whereas before you had to go as a gamer, like I used to be a gamer myself, I used to play online games, and I had to
Mm.
actually go to a third party forum, find an escrow, and trust that escrow based on the reviews that he got to conduct a trade with me. And I mean, how did I know for sure that the reviews weren't even fake, right? And he could just take my stuff, and then I'd be left with nothing, right? So there's that
Mm.
risk, right? And they've actually solved this major. And apart from all these other information, like for example the non-fungible assets and all this sort of stuff, they've actually solved one major problem in the gaming world by doing
Mm.
that.
Yeah, and another thing I absolutely love is ownership. You know, the fact that you mentioned NFT, but
Yeah,
the point of having control of those assets, being able to, you know, assert a value on them also, especially if they've created those assets in a marketplace. Because, you know, as I mentioned to you before, having children who, you know, want to engage in certain software or in games that do have those, you know, token-like structures, often we're paying for that, you know, that time for them to play, but you don't get anything back for that. Like there's no asset return. You know, once they finish playing that, even if they do have built out up some assets there,
yeah,
or they built up a bank of value, that's all lost, you know, in that centralized model. So what I really like about this is it does teach even more beyond just the gaming asset themselves. It teaches them about finance. It teaches them about how to manage money. It teaches them about the value of cross-chain potential value, because some of these assets may move in and likely will move in cross-chain situations. And then we also see the potential for these values to be have good liquidity at some stage with good off-road and good on and off ramps. So there's a lot at play here, more than just the gaming value of these real assets. And right now we're seeing evidence of these ecosystems or these platforms really building. And right now we're still a subject of a lot of speculation, and we see that on the, you know, the breadth of an influencer, sometimes we see the price can move, or you know, on some announcements, let's say. But over time, that will transition into a utility based like proof, where the more we see increase in it, of that utility being adopted by as intended, we should see by default a response where there's longitudinal growth in that asset. Right now, we don't see that, and that is a big issue. We don't, because we're still in that transformative period of time where, once again, people are still experimenting with many different assets and speculating on that basis, and often reacting to strategies of a lot of partnerships in a small period of time announced to essentially pump prices. People will follow that to make money. But once all of this sort of changes its form and we start to see more of less of that kind of conduct and more focused on longitudinal utility value, I think that's when things like Engine are really going to come to the fore, because people are going to go and support something that does definitely have proof that its token means something beyond talk.
Exactly. And they had that collaboration with Microsoft. I wouldn't say partnership, but more like a collaboration with Microsoft to help.
Yes,
Well, not to help, but to kind
with
of
Azure.
with the Azure developers to not to promote them, but I would say to kind of reward them in a way for their work by giving them a non-fungible token. So that is pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, to kind of move on from this topic to the final topic, just to talk a little bit about your YouTube channel and the structure of your interviews, which are absolutely smashing, absolutely awesome. A lot of
Well,
people
thank
have
you.
been following your interviews, and when YouTubers do interviews with crypto startups, not many of them present interest, to be honest. I don't know if it's just the actual startup themselves, but all these startups that come to you are actually the big ones. Either they've been a Binance IEO, or I don't know, they've been in the space for some time and you're bringing them on for updates and things like that. So I've noticed that you're picking these top projects. So how is it? How do you actually filter a lot of these projects before you actually talk to the more startups? Should I say? How did they even get to you in the first place?
This is a good question. Not many people ask me this stuff because obviously not being interviewed very often. But basically, what happens is I don't really give out my email. And you probably know that once you give out your email, you would likely get inundated with a lot of different offers or a lot of different interested parties who want to be on your platform. Now, I don't really get that much at all because I don't really see myself as an influencer like many who go for that algorithm and go for the subscribers and followers. And I don't want to suggest that that strategy isn't of value, because it is. Clearly having a lot of taking that route means you can get a lot of money. But that was never my agenda, and that's reflected in my very, very slow growth. But one of the things I've always tried to do is research myself. And there have been times where I haven't, and I've had some support from externally. Like it might be someone who I call an agent. Now, an agent is someone who works between, for example, a VC or an exchange and the influencer. And often they're called things like advisors or the cult consultants, or I just call them agents because I just see it that way. And so sometimes they might drop in and say, "Hey, Brad," because I know them, and they say, "Hey, have a look at this. Have you seen this startup?" But what I always try to do is I try to look into that startup and assess what they're about. And some of the projects that I will talk to are not necessarily ones that I personally would invest in, for example. But I do it because I really like to ask some of those hard questions, and that's why the interviews go so long.
Yeah.
Because one of the reasons why I started doing the interviews like I do, because I don't get a lot of following, and that was never my intention. But it was because I knew Ian Bellina way back in 2017, and I don't think he'd mind me mentioning this, but we used to sort of have a lot of rivalry in the sense of, he would interview someone, or he would have connections and he would be able to access certain IEOs and ICOs and that sort of thing. And one of the things I found was that a lot of the time these releases of information were timed according to financial benefit. And I'm not suggesting Ian alone, I'm talking just more generally, where often it was after when things like pre-sales or private sales closed. So for me, it was a case of I really wanted to get to these parties as quickly as I could to get that information out to the people so that they could compete, in a more open sense. If they wanted to go and look into something, I wanted to give them the earliest opportunity to do so. So for me, the interviews were all about trying to open up the dialogue and really dig into the value of this startup so people could have at least access to knowledge that many people were charging for, whether that be from a news entity or whether that be for private courses or whatever. So to answer your question going back, is that I absolutely do reach out. That's the main way I contact CEOs or CTOs. Not that many come to me, but more and more are starting to through people I trust. So if I'm really time poor and I don't have a lot of resources or time because I'm on my own doing this, and also trying to build out Block Vera, which is the same rationale, I might look into something because someone suggested it, whether they're a friend or whether they're those third parties.
Yeah.
But I still believe though that the deep dive is important. That boring long conversation, it has to be had from some people so that people can then look more into something rather than rely on the collective shill. Because 20 minutes is not enough. It's just not enough to really understand everything about a startup. And what you'll see patterns.
Watch 5 YouTubers and invest.
I always say that, I've said that rule. So I say 5 VCs, 5 influencers, and you've got something, because it has real effects. Yeah. And in between that, a lot of complexity in this web we call crypto. There's a lot going on. But, my intention is not obviously to encourage people to go and gamble on anything. But because I was a teacher, I can't really take that part away from me. It's built inside me. So for me, it's just like no matter whether someone gives me that name or whether I find that myself and reach out, which is, exhausting, but I do that a lot. It's just because I really do want people to have the chance to learn as much as they can about something, because I hope that some of these have long-term utility value. But I'm also very much a realist, and I know that there's no empirical evidence yet to say that many of these are going to make it. 99% probably will die. Yeah. Andreas Antonopoulos is right. And that's why, we see the likes of, for example, Chico Crypto, whom I've known for a long time. He has shown over time that he'll change his portfolio and he'll be very transparent about that. And the reason is simply because of the value in doing that. Because once again, when you leapfrog into new waves of projects, it's often because the price of them beforehand was exhausted. And that doesn't mean necessarily some of these won't, continue on and build, but it's all because of the speculation waves. So, in that respect, he's certainly profiting, and that's not at all uncommon to do. But then there's also the question mark of, which is the 1%? Which are those that are actually going to survive long term? Because I'm not really a trader. I might buy and sell some assets, sometimes, but I'm not like that day trader trying to make a very fast buck. I do actually want to see some of these teams succeed because they spend so much time trying to build something of value, but getting that token right, getting the token modeling right, is probably the hardest aspect of these startups because many of them just used it as a fundraising mechanism to start.
Exactly. Yeah.
And moving beyond that to make the switch like Ethereum questionably may have from security to then commodity, we need to see real proof of even beyond that, from moving from security commodity to then utility proof, that correlation of that unit of value and their ecosystem, because otherwise this pattern of behavior will just continue of shifting portfolio to suit the market, keep buying, selling, and move on, and then see a wave of death behind.
Yeah, and you end up selling on the dip to buy a new asset which is priced high, and then that asset drops, and then you panic sell. And I'm saying this has happened to a lot of people, right, in the crypto space.
Well, often for the retailer it is reactionary. You're right, but for the influencer, they're privileged. One of the privileges now we see in this very small market is that they can actually collectively move price. Whether they acknowledge that or not, they can. And that's why I was saying to you before with the 5 and 5. And so if they get in early, they can actually, through their own through their own depth of audience, if there's enough of that noise and not enough of that hype, they can actually, create some sort of buzz. That buzz results in a big rise in price. And then what does tend to happen is over a period of time, we'll see those move across to new assets, and leave a trail of dust, the crypto dust, where they've sold out perhaps in some of those situations. Yeah. So I'm not suggesting that any of us, Chico included, are doing anything abnormal. It's quite common. All the way to VCs and even exchanges probably.
If they have a big following, it's going to happen. I mean, anybody with 50,000 subscribers or more, which have over 5,000 views on average per video, are going to have that power to move an asset, to be honest, especially a low cap.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned low caps because they're the highest risk, much like we see of leverage trading. And I can tell you from being an ambassador for some of the lower caps as well, there's immense risk there because liquidity is still relatively important, or is, if not, is king when in crypto. We see that with Bitcoin, for example. One of its core assets, aside from its social network, is its liquidity. Yeah. And so when you are dabbling with something so incredibly illiquid and something you can't easily cash out on, if that's your play, then again, it harks back to immense risk because we still need to see that each token correlates with the business model. And even today, it's still difficult for me, as hard as I press, to get that out of the startups to really showcase. Yeah. So that's why, you mentioned in gaming, it matters because there's much more likely that things like some of the DeFi will have those correlates, certainly gaming. And I also think more discussion needs to be had in the future about stablecoins because they are also going to lead into a lot more liquidity and a lot more support for other assets because they're palatable for those that are not in crypto because they're looking for something that's less volatile, even though it's pegged to dirty fiat that's pegged to nothing.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, that's actually very true. But actually, when you research into the project, you read the full white paper, or do you just
always
pick parts?
No, I always read it. Even yesterday, I was speaking with, I'm trying to think who it was. I was speaking with a protocol, and basically, we were scheduled to speak at a certain time, and I hadn't finished the full reading of the white paper, so I had to delay the interview.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I did because I didn't want to arrive at that interview and not understand all aspects of its white paper because you may miss something to ask them, you may miss something to press to them. So for me, it's really important to do that research. And I often read into other things. I often ask them to send me their pitch decks. I ask them to send me any other literature. I'll read through some of their Medium articles. I might contact other researchers.
Yeah.
Like one of the people I really respect in the space, and he hasn't followed me back yet, but maybe one day he will. And that's Larry from The Block. He's very controversial. A lot of people don't like him, and that's their choice. But I do respect his research, you know, and his ability to be independent and look into things from his own standpoint. And I'm not speaking of The Block here. I'm just talking about Larry. So sometimes I'll message him and say, hey, what do you think about this? And don't really get a response back, but I do endeavor to contact other researchers to get more of an understanding of something before I speak with them. Because, you know, at the end of the day, you do want to put forward the best quality information, the best quality questions in prep to really elicit the best of what they have to offer, or the worst. Because sometimes the companies I talk to, as I said, they're not ones I would touch. But at least you get to decide yourself, and I won't comment on, you know, giving anyone the green light, on anything, because it's just not my right.
I can tell that you've done a lot of research on them, because when you talk, I mean, they sound really professional, and it just looks like the project is good. I mean, even though that's not your intention, it looks like the project is good. Just the way you're talking to them and the way you're asking these questions is like, wow, this project's really advanced. I mean, technologically speaking, they've done a lot of things. But then that comes the question, how well do you understand all these technical aspects in the white paper? Because a lot of this terminology is very difficult to understand. Like I'm not a developer. I'm a database developer, so I only work with database code. But a lot of this terminology is very difficult even for myself to understand from a technical point of view. So how do you manage that? I mean, do you have a technical background, or do you just search on Google to try to pick?
That's such a good question. Actually, I'm not a techie, and I've always been clear about that. I came from the humanitarian side of teaching, so I guess, the linguistic skills or the language skills and the interview skills come from that. Yeah. But when it comes to things I don't understand, I'll tend to reach out to someone to help me understand it better, or I'll address that straight to the CTO, for example. Like yesterday, I was talking with the CTO of Teller. And they are really interesting because I'm fascinated by decentralized oracles as well at the moment. We saw the likes of all of the hype with Chainlink. And I want to understand, and there's actually a lot to be said about other decentralized oracle efforts. So I had an interview yesterday with Teller, and it was interesting because he is highly technical, and I was trying to, keep in step with his responses. And that's not easy to do when perhaps sometimes you don't understand completely some of the aspects. But for the most part, what I found is that the white papers aren't that long, and a lot of the terms in crypto aren't that, difficult, having done this for a few years. So a lot of it is now familiar to me. But when there is something that isn't, then, sometimes I might say to them, look, can we have a deep dive on this for 20 minutes in a second interview? Let's really focus on this because I don't quite understand this. Or I might put in the notes something like, if you want to know more about this, here's a link. So yes, when you're not technologically savvy in all instances of a startup, I think it's important not to pretend and not bullshit the audience, because at the end of the day, we do want clear and concise information, but more for the holistic first interview, I don't tend to go into the kind of depth of technological discovery as I might in subsequent interviews, because basically you just want that overview to really understand. So if they're talking about, let's say yesterday, if they're going in depth about the nature of the decentralized oracle, if they're talking about off-chain and on-chain data, for example, and how that plays into some of the more detailed mechanisms that is the oracle, then maybe you get too far into it. But I always know, because I'll start tapping my foot in the interview, because I'll start to get nervous and think, okay, I'm out of my own depth here, and I'll try and rein that back into a conversation that is something I can understand and something I can really build up. Something that you can
manage and control.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to send a message like I am techie, because I'm not. But I love the tech. And I think that's the difference, is that I came in with a tech premise. And I can't explain to you why, because I'm not technological, but I do really, really love thinking about that side of things. And that's why I would invest in them. That's why I do invest in that side. I look for long-term investments, not the short-term.
Yeah. No, really, really good response. And actually, just now, the final question is actually, well, not the final question of the interview. I want to ask you one last question, but just on this topic, I know that a lot of your interviews are actually free. You reach out to them and you don't
Yes.
charge. But how do you actually monetize at all when it comes to crypto or your channel? Do you have any sort of monetization, or is it just completely free and no?
At the moment, sadly for me, no. And I've been transparent about ambassadorships. So I had my last ambassadorship was with MITx or with Morpheus Labs,
Yeah,
and I received some compensation or some money for working with them, you know, and
yeah,
building up their educational side. An ambassador is basically like the cousin of the advisor. Their role, I felt I created that role because it didn't really exist before, is being someone who represents the information and doing updates all the time, letting people know exactly what's going on for
yeah,
that startup. Because there wasn't really a lot of that happening. So, you know, so I could survive, I thought of this idea of an ambassadorship because I've always found and struggled with, I found it difficult to take money from a startup to do something like a review or an interview. It's not, and I have done that before in the past, long ago, when it was my means of trying to survive in this space. And I disclosed them, obviously. But then I just decided that wasn't for me at that time because I needed some time to do a lot of free work and work out how I could possibly monetize in a way that suited me. So I did a lot of free work, and then I did some ambassadorships, and then I stopped doing those, and now I just do free work at the moment.
mm,
And the reason is not necessarily because you know, I want to do good. It's just that that's what's happened. Is that I think when people know you're free, then they can really relax and listen to that and absorb that information, me
yeah.
included.
That's
It
true.
really freed me up. But it means eventually that I'm going to leave because I can't sustain this long term. That's not practical. So my thinking is a good friend of mine in the space, actually, named Crypto Murmur, he suggested doing something like patronage where you basically encourage a bit like sponsorship, but from a
Yeah,
few parties, like radio, for example, where you might have a section of the radio that's sponsored, you know, as information, as an ad, but then you'll get into the real crux of what you're talking about. So that may come if I can survive and stay in this space. Otherwise, I'll have to leave and go back to teaching. But I do want to be transparent and say that I don't encourage people to do what I do because it's really hard to do free work day in, day out, you know, and have children and a
it's very
life.
tough. Reading white papers is very tough. I know the easiest white paper I've ever read from all the reviews I've been doing has to be the one from Kava. I would tell you that is the most simple
I
white
agree.
paper, and that was a recent review I did, and it just wasn't enough. I actually did a bit more research on them by looking through the internet, trying to find more references to Kava and see what they're all about, because the white paper is just so small, and that actually surprised me because I think more projects should be keeping things simple, like Kava. Maybe not that simple, but quite
Mm.
around that area, because a lot of them are just like huge, like we're talking 20-30 pages, as you're well aware.
Well, it's so funny you talk about that too, because a lot of the time in the ICO and IEO bubbles, a lot of the white papers weren't written by the team anyway, you know, and I was friends with teams who were kind of like the white paper police in Asia. And they were
Yeah,
checking the veracity of some of these white papers and looking at whether or not they were authored by the teams, and many of them weren't, because there was an industry of selling white papers to startups, you know, to look like they were real when none of them were, and they were just all fake to raise capital to then go and spend their money however they wanted to. So it's really interesting you do say that.
yeah,
But I am of the opinion, and I agree, that Carver have a very, very easy read when it comes to the information. I don't even know if I'd call it a white paper. I told them that because it was not like a pitch deck. It was just so easy and
yeah,
clean.
exactly, yeah,
But I do think that over time it's good to have both. It's good to have those academic references, especially if there's peer reviews involved, because underneath the presentation that's easy for the retailer, you
yeah.
still have to have the proof of the tech. And that has to be really comprehensive with a lot of evidence. Because it's the tech that long-term is going to actually make that asset valuable, not the other way around. And it's the utility, obviously, being back mapped now in 2020, especially coming forward to next year. That's where I think we're going to see a lot more focus on, okay, it's great to have this speculative game. It's great to have a crypto casino, but what's more out there for the future for those people like me, for example, who don't really want to dabble in the casino as much as, you know, just relax and invest in something that has the potential for real value and real uptake and adoption. We don't talk about that enough. And Ethereum obviously is a good subject there because we see that developer crowd expanding, ever expanding, cohort of people supporting the DeFi movement, which is a movement, by the way. It's not just, it's not ascribed solely to Ethereum, but Ethereum has a lot of the dev share, a lot of the market share there.
Yeah.
So a lot of the interest. And so in that respect, they're doing exceptionally well in trying to build out this narrative of financial shift, a new paradigm when it comes to monetary design and even beyond that, asset design. I think that there's a lot exciting for the future in 2020, but I just, as someone who's here for the education, I just want to see that marry more and more and more with the technology. And I want that to drive the discussions and the future of crypto, not all of this speculation and all of this price buzz and all of these parties that are all colluding together to try and build up prices for the short term. I'm just getting so tired of that because anyone can get rich on making a quick bet to get enter and exit. But what does it actually do for crypto, and what does it do to encourage people to come in?
Yeah, it actually hurts it. Yeah, because if you remember that video from PewDiePie, who is I think the #1 YouTuber, if I'm not mistaken. He started off as a gaming channel, and the one video about crypto that he had was about BitConnect, just because he had the impression that the whole crypto space is a scam. And imagine, you're not going to talk about Bitcoin, you're not going to talk about anything else but BitConnect. Come on. And it just shows you that that's the impression that he got. And he was making fun of Carlos Matos from BitConnect, that famous video that he has. I was laughing myself at the beginning. I remember I watched it like 3-4 times in a row and I was still laughing. It was one of those type of videos,
Well, it's really funny you say that because, now we see the likes of Trevon James supporting Hex, and I don't want to comment. I promised Richard Hart that I would really research properly into Hex before I referenced it in any way, and I'm going to keep that promise.
And you're going to have it for an interview, by the way.
Well, if you'll have me,
I hope so, because the guy is extremely intelligent, and I would really like to hear what you have to say to kind of force his hand, I would say, because you could usually find these sort of gaps in a project, and you could really push forward that that sort of stuff. And I just want to kind of get his response on that and see how he can defend it and how he can counteract it. So I think that would be a really good interview. Bright.
I would love to interview him, and I explained to him too my agenda is objective in that instance because I don't have an investment in Hex, and I don't have an agenda to try and derail his his argument. And I think that's where he jumps in a lot, and he assumes that everything's a debate because he's very, very bright. We all know he has incredible wordcraft when it comes to putting forward his agenda in anything. But when it comes to Hex, there's just some important questions that need to be asked as well, and very forward ones. And without having that sort of reactionary emotional response, hopefully we can do that. We have texted before to try and set something up, but I need to deeply dive into it to make sure that I ask questions that are relevant. And don't waste his time also, because already in the readings I've done, I would be very reticent to use the word scam like many have. I will say that
me neither.
Because it's designed to be not that. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have real concerns about its architecture or, whom benefits most from that. And that's
nothing is perfect. Nothing is perfect.
But certainly, I'd love to have that conversation with Richard. But going back to one of the unusual strategies that I will definitely be questioning Richard on is to have these conversations, for example, or espouse the support from someone like Trevon James, because this was one of the loud speakers from YouTube promoting BitConnect. So it's like, okay, I get
it raises some questions.
It raises important questions because yes, it's going to raise eyebrows and get a lot of attention, but at what cost to any brand when they're attached or associated with someone like that? Who's done that. And there's, I'm not trying to suggest that he's done anything, questionable with Hex, but I know for sure, and many people know that already his involvement with BitConnect was, it was more than unpalatable. It was, very difficult to accept, as something even legal. So now we move into the space of, questioning, why would anyone want anyone like that near your brand?
Exactly. No, and we'll see how things go, and I'll be looking forward to that if you do interview him in the end. And now for the final question of today's interview, Brad, what is one thing in life that you truly desire?
Okay, that's an interesting one. The thing I'm probably most desire is time. And I know that's abstract, but I desire time with my family because you can't get it back. You can't. Money it's pointless desiring that because there's no happiness in the pursuit of money. If you have it, great, enjoy it. But pursuing things of monetary value or physical value, that's sort of like an endless, chasing rainbows type thing. So for me, I desire time. I desire more and more time, especially since I've done crypto. I have had less time with my family because I love this too. So for me, it's time with people I love because that gives me the most happiness that I could possibly have.
Wow, very good response. And that's really unique as well. I haven't had anybody answer me that. So cool. Thank you very much for coming on. And I'm really happy to have interviewed you. You've answered some amazing questions that we had amongst a lot of them, like leverage exchanges, crypto, and life as well in general. So thank you very, very much. And I hope to see you again in the future so we can talk about other things related with crypto as things progress in this space, because things move very, very quickly, as you well know.
Absolutely. Cool. And I want to say thank you so much for being an ambassador for truth in this space and for representing, what is to be a very exciting space in crypto. You are not shying away from some of the tough stuff either. I've noticed that. I have a lot of respect for you, mate, sincerely, as a fellow educator and also someone who wants to be an ambassador for quality journalism as well. So keep going, mate. I really do support you.
Thank you very much. I much appreciate it. Cool. Thank you very much for watching the video, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe if you're new. And I'll also find the link to BlockchainBrad's YouTube channel in the description of the video if you're interested to check out. If you haven't already heard of BlockchainBrad, I'm sure you probably have, but just in case. Thank you very much for watching. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.